Welcome, folks, to VietLead's webinar on our new deportation defense resource webpage. For those of you who are new to our organization, we're a nonprofit community organization and based in Philly, organizing and supporting Vietnamese and Southeast Asian community, founded in 2016, and since then have done civic engagement work, health work, youth, land, and food access work, in addition to the deportation defense work that you're engaging with today. Um, for folks who don't know me, my name is Kenny. I am one of the community defense coordinators here at VietLead. I've been doing this work here at VietLead for the past 4 years. Supporting folks with Southeast Asian folks with criminal convictions and final removal orders to find relief and support their cases. This webpage specifically is in response to the overwhelming need for resources and information from our impacted community members. Unfortunately, due to the influx of calls for help and also low staffing, we can't take on any new cases at the moment. And while we can't help everybody, we want to share information as far and wide as possible so people can make their own informed decisions and choices and get the support that they need. This is an ongoing resource for community members and families who are originally or whose families were refugees and immigrants from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and for folks or loved ones who are impacted by what we call crimmigration, meaning that you have a previous criminal conviction, you lost your green card, and now have a final removal order. Historically, VietLead has focused on anti-deportation work, focus on folks with final removal orders due to criminal convictions, not necessarily just undocumented or mixed status folks. So this is sort of our area of expertise. The last thing I say before I'll jump in is, I know this is a scary time for impacted people and loved ones and family and friends, as ICE has really ramped up deportations and detentions for all immigrant communities all over the country. Um, I know that, or we know that having these conversations, especially with your family members and friends, um, can feel nerve-wracking and scary and uncomfortable. Um, but we really think and believe that being prepared is necessary as much as possible to prevent your deportation, and at the very least, if not prevent it, then set you and your family and your loved ones up as much as possible to um, face an emergency situation in which you are detained or someone is detained and deported. So just jumping in, we first start this webpage with a definition of what is crimmigration and how are Southeast Asians impacted. And so for those who may be newer, you may be interacting with this issue for the first time, since things have picked up in immigration in the country. We use the word crimmigration to describe the intersection between criminal law and immigration law. And there was, not to get into the nitty-gritty, but there was policies passed in the 80s and 90s that basically intertwined immigration consequences with criminal legal consequences, right? So, for example, a lot of Southeast Asians, came here as refugees or as legal permanent residents, committed a crime in which it meets certain criteria, and because of their conviction, lost their green card, lost their status, and were issued what's called a final removal order, in which they are now deportable and may or may not report to ICE frequently throughout the year. Um, and the distinction with folks with final removal orders is that technically folks have already been taken to court. That's how you get the final removal order, right? A lot of folks were taken, like, were in immigration court or signed off immigration papers while they were incarcerated, and are now with this final removal order. So ICE doesn't necessarily have to take you to immigration court again, right? Because you already have that final removal order. They can just detain and deport you. Um, and so, that is, what we're working with in terms of what we talk about crimmigration and how Southeast Asian people are impacted. Um, there's no level of information or resources that will end any of this, obviously, right? That requires long-term policy changes across the nation around like how the immigration system is even designed, right? Um, but as much as possible right now, we're like, we want to share information. So again, so people can prepare as best as possible during this time. So we start off on this resource page with like what to do before ICE detention. We've organized this resource page in terms of most to least important steps. And so we recommend that if you don't get through all these resources, we recommend you start at the top here, especially before you or your loved one is detained by ICE, because once folks are detained, we've seen cases move really fast, right? And the likelihood of people getting relief or getting out is increasingly less likely, especially during this time. So before you want to do anything, um, it's important to request and gather all of your paperwork. So we know folks have cases from 10, 20, 30 years ago, and may not have all of your criminal and immigration paperwork, um, and that's fine. However, it's possible that, and actually pretty simple to get this paperwork. You can apply for what's called a Freedom of Information Act or a FOIA, which is basically, a law that gives the public the right to request access to records from any federal agency, including ICE, including U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, USCIS. And because you're requesting your own personal information, you should be able to access almost 100% of your records. Um, we want to emphasize too that, filing a FOIA request will not alert ICE. It's safe and it's your right to request your own information. And on top of that, right, like folks are already reporting to ICE and XYZ, and so it doesn't put you any more danger than folks, may already be facing, with their ICE check-ins and being on supervision or with a final removal order. So about the FOIA itself, there's two agencies you want to file a FOIA with. The first being, like I mentioned earlier, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. That's USCIS. This will return almost everything the government has in your immigration, including paperwork for when you first immigrated to your deportation proceedings when you were in court and got the final removal order. For some, this may be the only FOIA you actually need for lawyers to look at your case. The other one is to the agency called Executive Office for Immigration Review, or EOIR. This will specifically return documents around your immigration court proceedings. And while you may not need this necessarily for a lawyer to fully look at your case, we still recommend everybody does it. Um, yeah, so please do that. It can take a few months, several months, for FOIA requests to be processed with these agencies. And like a lawyer will need this regardless, to do a full case assessment. And some lawyers could probably do this for you, but will probably charge you a fee. And it's pretty simple to do it online yourself. And so you can we've linked here. Um, yeah, we've linked here like a step-by-step on how to file a FOIA from a resource that we created. It walks you through all these steps, and again, you can do this all online. If you are not savvy with computers, we recommend having a family member who may be more savvy to help you do this. The second, and of course, maybe the most obvious, consult an experienced lawyer about your case or your loved one's case, right? So do that FOIA at the same time that you're also consulting lawyers, because, you know, lawyers will need that paperwork at the end of the day. Um, and we know that folks may have feelings around lawyers, like negative experience with lawyers in the past about scams or lawyers not being responsive. But still, immigration law is changing every day. You need an expert in your corner to represent you. Um, in ICE detention, actually, ICE will communicate any updates to your situation to your lawyer. And so we know it's a costly investment. But if you can't afford at this time, or if you were able to find somehow like someone who could do it free or pro bono or low cost, that is more than ideal. But we just highly recommend that folks lawyer up. Um, and we recommend you do this ASAP, right? Because the sooner you get on this before if you're ever detained, right, the more that they have already worked on your case and know like the details of your case and can actually properly advocate for you and file the relevant um, forms of relief that could get you out of detention or stop your deportation or pause your deportation. Um, for those who are like, oh, who do I talk to? How do I know a lawyer is good? We have a list of vetted lawyers in Pennsylvania that we refer people to. Folks with the stars next to their name are more highly recommended folks who have more expertise on these types of cases. We've also linked uh, like some general guidelines for how to vet a lawyer so that you're not getting scammed or um, yeah, you know that that person is actually the expert that they claim to be. Besides getting a lawyer and getting your paperwork, we recommend talking to your family and friends, start emergency planning. Um, Start gathering documents for you and your family, right? Like passports, IDs, medical information, things that, you know, if you're picked up that you may need, or like say, for example, your kids will need, you know, these documents somewhere where a trusted, either a spouse or a family member, you know, can access that paperwork easily. Um, we've linked here another resource that we've put together, a whole packet of stuff that we recommend people do. So again, right, like gather important documents, get screened by an attorney, um, know your rights information, which we can get more into later, um, about like whether, you know, what happens when if ICE comes to your door, or like if ICE comes to your workplace, right? Um, like you know there's not many, but there are still some legal protections for people to um yeah, when ICE engages with you and attempts to rearrest you. Things that plan for medical needs is in here, plan for your financial needs. So again, right, like all this stuff, like, you know, who's going to care for your children, who's going to care for your finances, your property, right? This is conversations that we encourage people to have beforehand with trusted loved ones. Um, so that is that emergency planning packet. Yeah, and then again, right, like we mentioned earlier, if before you're detained, or if before, hopefully ICE, you know, never you never have an encounter with them, but if it happens, we've linked information on Know Your Rights. This is a resource from ACLU in Pennsylvania detailing the various rights you have in different scenarios, your rights on the street, in a car, at home, at work, et cetera, right? Like what are the legal protections you still have? Um, we also actually have done or some of our staff members here at VietLead have done a webinar, a Know Your Rights webinar for small business owners and workers in Vietnamese, and it's on YouTube. It's this link here. I won't click on it because I don't want the video to play. But you know, for Vietnamese speakers and for people, you know, who need that specific cultural and language context, please click on this link and watch that video there. Um, so that's like, you know, everything that you can do before detention. And again, that is the time for you to get ahead of the ball and really handle your case. What can you do if ICE detains you? All right. You know, it does get exponentially harder to fight someone's case once you're detained, but it's not impossible, and there are still some things that your loved ones can do to advocate on your behalf when you're detained. So the difference, right? Like when before you're detained, the main advocate for your case is the impacted person. Once the impacted person is detained, that onus kind of falls on the people who are outside still, who can talk to the relevant lawyer, to talk to the lawyers, or talk to the elected officials and community leaders who can actually, um, you know, support the impacted person's case. Um, so one thing that you can, so one resource we share with everybody is ICE has a online like public locator where if you know your loved one's A number and country of origin, you can track what detention center they're at. You can also use biographical information like first, last name, I think country of origin and date of birth. Um, yeah, to find out what where they're at. So I'll click on this link. This is what it looks like again, right? A number, country of birth, or biographical information here, and it should populate where that impacted person is at. This is important to know if like ICE is moving somebody to prepare them for deportation, right? That would be sort of your red flag. If suddenly they're moved to a different facility, that would be a red flag. Or, ICE also just transfers people time to time, and so you generally want to know where your loved one is. And pro tip, sometimes ICE will misspell names or first and last names are switched, and so just try different combinations if your loved one is in there and you can't find them. Um, We also recommend you contact your city and state and federal level elected, so your elected officials at every level of government. Um, these are folks who are voted in and who represent you in your wants and needs. Um, we have here like a template email to send um, to your elected officials. It has like a general outline, and you can obviously go in and type and fix things up according to your story and what you want to tell them. Um, if folks don't know who your elected officials are, we have two different links here. One to find your city council member by plugging in your address, and then similarly, one for your Pennsylvania state and your US federal elected, um, again, using your address. Um, yeah, and these are the people who actually will have like the political connections to be able to make certain calls and may have an influence over ICE's detention of your loved one. So email those folks, mail them, call their offices, let them hear from you. Um, and the next thing we have here is connect with resources. So in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia to support your loved ones or or your resettlement. So as much as we're like, okay, advocate for your loved one in XYZ, it's also important to simultaneously prepare in the case that the worst happens and your loved one is deported, to connect with the organizations who work with people in Southeast Asia, to help them get back on their feet, right? So we have the Balo Project who's worked with people um, uh, who are deported to Vietnam. They have an FAQ page for what happens. So we recommend that, for folks who are curious, like, oh, what actually happens when you land, right? If you're deported, what do you have to do? You can go here and get all those questions answered. This is also a law office that has a lot of really good information for that kind of stuff. Cambodia, there's an organization called CAVAL, which is the receiving organization for Cambodian deportees, and they help resettlement support like legal documentation, employment, temporary housing, basic medical support. Um, yeah, they're the lifeline for folks over there. And then for folks in Laos, there's an organization called Collective Freedom that has been supporting folks in Laos and have connections to people over there. And again, like similar to Balo Project, they have FAQ and stuff that you can read here uh, to get informed on what it looks like once folks are deported. And lastly, just stay up to date on the policy around deportation to Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Like what is the current repatriation agreement between these countries? So if I click on this one, and scroll to the bottom of this page here, there actually is information on all three countries about like what the status is between the agreement of the agreements between these countries. So, this is probably a question for folks, for folks who are like Vietnamese, like, oh, is there still pre-95, post-1995 protections? For folks in Cambodia, uh, a class action lawsuit that is being settled. And then for folks in Laos, like, while there's no formal repatriation agreement, we've seen a lot of folks being picked up because of U.S. pressure on the Lao government. Yeah, so you can find all that stuff here. For folks in Laos, there's an additional toolkit about how deportation is looking for folks in Laos. And then again, for this is specific for folks for Cambodian folks. There is a class action called Chun um, that was waged against ICE by Asian Law Caucus. That's an organization starting back in 2017. What's important to know is that, and folks may be informed on this, but at the current moment, ICE has to give Cambodian folks 2-week notice if ICE will try to detain and deport them. I think that settlement is currently being like finished up, but for the meantime, I think those 2-week warnings are still going out. Um, and as part of the settlement, Cambodian folks who are in that lawsuit will be receiving a package from ICE being like, hey, like you have a final order of deportation. Here's your paperwork. Please go get legal support. And this is a resource guide that we've linked here if you want to read more about what the Chun settlement is and how it impacts Cambodian folks. Um, we have in the last section here in terms of resources is just other stuff, other resources. These first two here are in-depth resources and guides on Southeast Asian deportation generally, explaining everything that you need to know, legal information and steps. It's kind of similar to what this page is doing, but with different nuance and information. Um, this third guide here is for employers especially. So if there's any allied employers who are worried about your employees and their situations, this is information on um, what you can do to protect your employees as much as possible um, while still following the law. Um, the very last section we have here may be of interest for impacted people. Um, a lot of the questions we've been getting since the beginning of this year is, how do I self-deport? Like, I don't want to be at risk of being redetained in these terrible, harsh immigration prisons. Like, I'm ready to be deported, and I want to do it myself and make my own plans, so that, I can actually make those choices and feel dignified in doing so. Um, we have information on all how to do that for all three countries. For Vietnam, we have sort of the most clear information. So this is from Collective Freedom, right? It details all the different steps that you need to do to be self-repatriated, right? You need a birth certificate from Vietnam, you need a passport, you need a biography thing, you need passport photos, and there's also links here with steps to how to do each, right? So say you don't have your original Vietnamese birth certificate. Oh, this is an FAQ on how to get that information. Um, right, so please go here if you're looking for that stuff. And again, like 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 I had said before, right? If this is something you choose to do, please get on it ASAP, because it says here this process may take 3 to 6 months depending on your situation. Um, for Laos, there isn't as much information formally. We've consulted a trusted partner organization in Providence, called the Providence Youth Student Movement PRISM. They're actually preparing to release a more in-depth toolkit on Lao deportation. So we've linked their page here. So please follow them for any updates um, around that toolkit. Otherwise, this is the general recommendation we've been having is we've listed the Lao consulate contact here, phone and email. Um, we've been told that impacted family members have been able to call and ask what the steps are for self-repatriation. Lao fluency is recommended. And then this is developing information that we're getting is that you can also print, complete, and submit a Laos permanent resident application. So it looks like this. It's in Lao. So I mean, and there's ways to translate a document online. You fill this out, you submit it to the Lao embassy, and once the Lao embassy approves that, they will issue a travel document, which will be valid for 30 days. And within that 30-day window, folks should make their travel arrangements and self-deport to Laos. Um, and so again, this isn't very formal information. This is information we're getting in live time. I think it's best if folks are able to call the Lao consulate um, and ask while we're waiting for more formal information or the toolkit that Prism is releasing. And lastly, for Cambodian folks, there's no formal like nonprofit resource yet for self-deportation in Cambodia, but this is the steps that we've been informed um, could possibly work. And so the first thing is find a travel agency that handles travel to Cambodia and ideally also has a direct connection with the Cambodian consulate. There is one agency that we've linked here, Phnom Penh Travel Services in Lowell, Massachusetts. Um, and we know that they've been able to help put folks self-deport and are open to working with folks out of state as well. And so once you're able to contact the travel agency and see if they're able to do it, um, you want to apply for something called a laissez-passer, which is a temporary travel document that allows you to go anywhere in Cambodia. Um, this is the list of documents you will need to be able to apply for that. So a work permit, a real ID, or a real ID application in some states. Um, Copy of your green card, or parent's green card or U.S. passport. Um, Oh, I think for the correction, I think it's actually for work permit. It's in some states they'll accept maybe even a work permit application, not necessarily you have to have the work permit. Um, the real ID is crucial to having. Without one, you actually could be detained at an airport when you try to self-deport. And we know that there's sort of blocks for folks getting real ID. Um, we'll try to update information about how to get that real ID as we find out. But if folks are able to do that and find out how to do that, you need the real ID to be able to self-deport for Cambodian folks. Um, so yeah, so again, you apply for the laissez-passer by getting all these documents. Once you have that, you can make your travel arrangements to Cambodia. Um, and when you land in Cambodia, you should be able to enter the country with the real ID and the laissez-passer. And then, a note that once you land in Cambodia, you'll have to apply for your own Cambodian ID, and you'll be able to do that with a copy of your parent's green card or U.S. passport, because then you need to put your name in what's called a family book, and then from there you're able to get a Cambodian birth certificate made and then apply for an ID. And important note for Cambodian folks, as you're going through this process of self-deportation, I'm sure maybe this actually applies to Lao and Vietnamese folks too, but we've only really heard about it in the case of Cambodian folks, where if you're applying for self-deportation and in that process and you have a check-in that's coming up and you may not be able to self-deport before that check-in, we've heard people have been able to email ICE, be like, hey, I have a check-in coming up. I'm planning to self-deport. So please, like let me do that. This way, you may not be detained at your next ICE check-in before you're able to self-deport. Yeah, and ICE will probably ask you to provide proof, and so you'll provide the documentation that we've listed here about how to get the laissez-passer, and just share that evidence that you're applying for these things to be able to self-deport. Um, so that is all the information we have on this web page as of now. Um, thanks again, folks, for tuning in. Uh, yeah, we hope that this information is actually helpful in this moment of crisis. Again, please share as far and wide as possible. And while we try to be as thorough and detailed and fact-checked as much as we can, um, again, the situation continues to develop. We're learning different avenues, and the laws are changing. And so we understand that folks may still have very specific questions about your own case or your own situation. So you can find the contact information for us at the bottom of this page here. Um, Again, we're not taking on any new cases right now, unfortunately, but we can answer questions and share information, and as much as possible, we can maybe refer you to legal resources. Um, and again, due to low staff capacity, we're actually only on the phone lines like for 2 afternoons of the week. That's 2 to 5 p.m. Eastern time on Thursdays and 1 to 5 p.m. Eastern time on Fridays. Otherwise, please email us at communitydefense@vietlead.org, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. You can also text us, and we may be able to get back to you quicker that way. Otherwise, we'll be returning and picking up calls during those two times on Thursdays and Fridays. Yeah, and if you call and we can't pick up, please leave a voicemail, or text us your name, um, what city and state you're calling from, and that you'd like to speak to someone about immigration resources. You can share a little bit about your situation if you're comfortable. Um, yeah, so that is our resource page. We'll continue to update it as we get more information. So please, every now and then just revisit the page and refresh to see if there are any updates. Um, Again, in the meantime, contact us if you have any questions. And yeah, we thank folks for tuning in, and we really hope that you and your loved ones are able to get the support you need during this time.